This is the Voigtlander 60mm Micro Four-Thrids lens. It features an incredibly large aperture of f0.95 with 10 aperture blades and a de-clickable aperture ring for smooth f-stop transitions. On the inside, it features 11 elements in 8 groups. It has a minimum focusing distance of just 0.34 meters, or 13 inches, putting it almost into macro territory. It weighs a considerable 860 grams, or 1.8 pounds. Fully manual, no autofocus, no contact points, no electronics whatsoever. Right then. This lens has been on my wish list for quite some time. And now that it's here, looking at it in person, the first thing that you notice is this lens is quite gorgeous. Pictures don't really do it justice. Everything about this lens screams precision. From its all-metal housing to the unique concave front element, the smooth action on the focus and aperture rings. Everything on this lens is exceedingly well designed, and it's exactly the kind of premium quality you would expect from the Voigtlander brand. And especially when you hold it in your hand. All 860 grams of it. You get the feeling that this lens is something special. But does it belong? When this lens was announced, I admit I was shocked. The short in the beginning of this video was a real email I sent to Voigtlander back in 2016, inquiring about longer focal lengths. So imagine my exhilaration when, 4 years later, in 2020, Voigtlander announced the 60mm telephoto lens. But then the spec sheet came out and I began having second thoughts. Who would want this enormous 2-pound German tank meant for a system known for being lightweight and compact? Is that extra reach from the 42.5mm worth the extra 300 grams and $350 premium? After sitting on these thoughts, watching the world collapse, a simpler question came to me. And to help answer it, I set up a series of shoots to put this lens to the test, to see if I could discover, why does this lens exist? So I want to talk about comparing this lens. The first thing to note is that I will not be comparing it against its competition because, frankly, it doesn't have any. There are only 3 other native Micro Four-Thrids lenses at 60mm, and all of them feature small, lightweight bodies and f-stops of 2.8 at the quickest. And even getting into adapted lenses, there aren't too many that stack up. What this means is that I'll be comparing this lens to the only lenses that are just as fast, have similar build quality, and similar pricing. Its own family. So in order to maximize time and information, I will be providing commentary over the photos I took with the Voigtlander 60mm. These sessions were mostly focused on portraitures with a few video clips added in. At the end is a small short film my friends and I created to help show off the 60mm, so stick around. Okay, so let's talk about the weight, because the weight is probably going to be the biggest turnoff for most users. At 1.8 pounds, you would assume that this is going to be a lens that you wouldn't be able to use handheld for long periods of time, but after 3 sessions of multi-hour long photo and video shoots, I'm actually surprised that this lens manages to be both not as heavy as it seems and much heavier than it seems, which leads me to the balance. And even knowing that the Voigtlander 60mm had a very close minimum focusing distance, I was still shocked to see that the barrel extended almost a full inch from its resting position, which became extremely noticeable after a few attempts when trying to capture macro shots as most of that weight shifted to the front. However, when using it for portraits, the balance of the 60mm and the GH5 was absolutely solid. And yes, it is heavy, but I never found it prohibitive in the sense that I had to stop a session to take a break. And I can honestly say that combined with the IBIS on the GH5, the weight actually helped more than it hurt and made for a very steady combo.
Okay, let's talk about the focus. Voigtlander is no stranger to manual lenses. In fact, every lens they currently make is manual focus, and I can't find a single instance of Voigtlander making an autofocusing lens. If you know of one, please comment below. The focus for the Voigtlander 60mm is astonishingly smooth, much like the rest of the Voigtlander lineup. It really feels like a cinema-style lens. However, I did find that the focus was a bit more fickle. It didn't feel as forgiving from the same distance as its sibling, the 42.5. Now, I did not measure the rotation of the barrel, but it definitely took 4 to 5 turns to get it to its minimum focusing distance. However, it never slowed me down. On another note, in comparison, all of the Voigtlander lenses have completely ruined fly-by-wire for me, and I doubt I will ever be as precise on the fly than with a manual focus lens. Okay, let's talk about the build quality. I'll say it again, it is a really beautiful lens. The simplicity of metal and glass gives me just a ton of confidence when holding it or traveling with it. Honestly, this lens feels like it should be a lot more expensive than it is, but that's the beauty of micro Four Thirds. Moving on. Okay, the low light. Many of the films or commercials I tend to work on never solely rely on available lighting. Many other low light examples exist for the Voigtlander Micro Four Thirds lens family, and all I'll say is that this lens lives up to the standards and expectations of the rest of the group. Speaking of cinema grade glass, the Voigtlanders have all been coated to match one another. And I've always loved the lowish contrast when wide open, and especially love how this lens renders skin tones and flares. The sharpness wide open isn't for everyone, but as you can see, I don't really mind it one bit. When stopped down, I wouldn't be surprised to see this be one of the best performing lenses in the Micro Four Thirds system. So why 60mm? Well, I have a preference for shooting with long lenses, but I wasn't sure if I was going to love the range of this lens, especially since I already own the longer 75mm. But the 75 isn't nearly as sharp wide open, and the 42.5 sometimes doesn't have the reach that I'd like to have. So the choice to make this lens 60mm seems like a well thought out decision, and besides my Leica 135 f2.8, this is one of my favorite lenses I have ever used for portraits.
They've been fighting a lot this week.
Oh, they probably have a lot of energy. I mean, they're still pretty young, so. Well, speaking of which, so yeah, how's the little one?
Haley has still been having night terrors every night. And she either just fights sleep completely or she wakes up in the middle of the night and she won't stop screaming, so.
Have you talked to her therapist?
Yes, but she hasn't been any help at all. And honestly, I can't even get her in often enough for it to make a difference.
Most kids in care have trouble sleeping at first. Usually it gets better though.
I just need a break. With no sleep and the constant meltdowns and home visits and all of the doctor's appointments, and I'm working.
Speaking of doctor visits, did you have a chance to submit the paperwork for Hunter's CANS assessment?
Yes, last week.
How's Hunter doing at the new daycare?
Well, he's been biting the other kids and pulling down his pants to show them his butt, so it hasn't really been going very well.
Oh, sorry. I imagine his teachers are not too happy about that. Okay, I can see if I could speed up the paperwork for Jared, and in the meantime, if you reconsider respite, just email me.
I've been shooting on the Micro Four Thirds system since about 2012, starting with the Panasonic GH5. I tried other lenses, like the Panasonic 12-35, 35-100, 7-14, and even the 20mm Pancake, but none of those lenses ever really inspired me enough to purchase them. So in 2014, the time came to purchase new lenses, and through my research, I discovered the Voigtlander brand. And it seemed to have everything that I could want. It was native Micro Four Thirds. It was full metal construction, manual focusing, de-clicked aperturing, and good in low light. I ended up buying the 17.5mm, the 25mm, and the 42.5mm all in one go. I later added the 10.5mm and adapted the 75mm from the Leica M line. And with the exception of a few projects over the last 7 years, the light from every photograph, short film, commercial, or even the 2 feature films that I did has passed through Voigtlander glass.
With no competition in its class, and what is now a mature ecosystem with over 70 native lenses, has Voigtlander managed to fill in the last bit of blank space on a shrinking map? Or is this the beginning of a new map with weird, niche lenses like the recently released Panasonic 10-25 f1.7? It seems strange to think that a single lens could imbue new purpose into the micro Four-Thrids system, and you might be tempted to write the 60mm off as just another lens. But I've come to the conclusion that this lens exists because it is a celebration of 264 years of passion and creativity. It is an expression of trust between artists, designers, engineers, and filmmakers alike. This lens is an elegant but powerful reminder of why Voigtlander is the oldest name in cameras and is still raising the bar.